Welcome to Flourish-Meant, the podcast on living life as you are meant to, so you can flourish. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to have with me today Claire Fullerton, the award-winning author of 4 traditionally published novels and 1 novella. Her books are geared toward her characters' triumph over adversity and healing the past. She hails from Memphis, but now lives in Malibu, California. Welcome, Claire.
Hello, Tina. I am so happy to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
I'm just as thrilled as I can be to have you here. You are here to talk to us about time and healing wounds. What in your history and background and in your heart makes you so passionate about helping guide people toward healing wounds and the times of their lives?
I think that I like to speak with all people, just in camaraderie and conversation. And this is why I write novels. This business of comparing notes in life on the human experience. And I think that triumph over adversity, that concept, I believe, one can always retain that that's possible if they have an aerial view, as in a long range, bigger picture of the continuum of life, and that we are all in a work, in progress, in process, at all times, and following the path with faith and hope and certainty, and looking for guidance along the way in faith and hope and certainty that we can and we will receive it if we stay connected to the source, to God, to the divine, as an aid along our path. In other words, I'm very big on the idea of the fruits of the Spirit. And I believe that we are all born with that. And it's a question of understanding that, acknowledging that, and then the search therefore becomes the search for an alignment with God, with the Holy Spirit, knowing that its entire purpose is for our benefit. So for me, I like writing about characters, people that are in predicaments, because we all fall into debilitating predicaments. There are all kinds of conditions within the human experience that we, depending on your perspective, fall prey to. And so it therefore becomes a question of how do we work ourselves out of some of these predicaments. And that this is, again, why I write and what I like to explore, the subjects of how people maintain their faith and hope in moving forward, even through the dark times. So personally, I'm not any different than anybody else in terms of the vagaries that life, can have in store for us. And so, with me personally, I think I've never really thought about this, heavily, but I will so now and say, probably the family I was born into had a lot going for it, and it looked really good on paper. And yet there was alcoholism in my family bloodline from my grandfather, from my father. And then I experienced the death of my father when I was young enough. I was 15. And my mother remarrying and all kinds of adjustment phases for me, moving from the north to the south and having to, essentially when you're very young and you go to a new school and all of these things, I found looking back now that I'm in my 50s, that I can see now that all along there was a big story going on, that now I can see as very beneficial to ultimately making me the writer that I am now, because I have a vantage point now in hindsight, where I can look back and I can say everything that I went through, although trying at the time, has led me here. So I think it's a question of, one's spirit and one's attitude and one's perspective. And I think that we are most helped when we try to align our thinking, our mind frame, our attitudes with what is good in this world. And I think that we can pick and choose our attitudes and our perspectives. And so if we can just even aim for that, I think that your entire life will shift. For instance, you can be taken out of a victim mode. These things have been vested upon me, and I am a victim. If you change just that mind frame, just that alone, to see your life and the vagaries of what you go through as part of your story. This is part of my story. And this is how I'm going to choose to relate to it. This is what I like to write about how any character in any of the 5 books that I've written, how they choose, because we choose, to perceive adversity. And so I hope that answers your question.
It does. You have lots of really great nuggets in there, and I just want to pull some of those out and dwell on them a little bit longer. I love that you're talking about the places we can be, the vagaries of life, the valleys of life where everything's hot and sticky and dark and dismal. We can easily slip into a victim mindset. Even if we're victimized, we don't have to dwell in that victim mindset. But stepping out of that is a shift in how you see what to do with what happens to you. It's kind of what it sounds like you're saying.
Indeed. And it's about consciousness. And I think nowhere is it written that this life on earth was going to be easy. And this is funny. I have some great girlfriends. I am blessed with great lifelong girlfriends. And we keep current with everything, the good and the bad. And I found that, I've been in California for more than 20 years, and I still consider myself a Southerner. And all of my best girlfriends in life, they're all in Memphis. And, we're all grown, married, children. We've got the whole thing going on. And we tend to get on the phone and laugh. That it is humor that's gotten us through a lot of the pitfalls in our lives. And we have, grown accustomed to being there for each other and keeping current with our lives. And there's not a better panacea than humor, in my opinion. The ability to reach out to those that know you and know your history and understand you and do not judge you and that are there for you. These women friends that I am blessed to have, when in dire straits, I'll pick up the phone and I'll say, okay, you ready? Wait for this one. And we tend to laugh through things, and it makes everything seem so much easier. And you find that these pitfalls are surmountable, that it's just a question of time and your attitude and how you choose to deal with it. And, my friends and I have made great conversation over just this subject of, our perception. And it's not that these bad things aren't going to happen to all of us in life, because they are. And it is promised nowhere that it's going to be otherwise. So the question becomes how you deal with it. And I've always been an adherent to, an adage that I may have made up myself. I don't know if I read it somewhere or what have you, but it remains, you decide who you're going to be in this life. And once you decide who you're going to be, then you get about the business of becoming that person. And that doesn't happen overnight. I believe it happens by practice of you being the best version of yourself through power of will that you can possibly perceive that you can be. and you get focused on that aim, and you walk the walk, and you act as if you have to. And whatever you need to do, you decide who you're going to be in this life, and you get about the business of becoming that person through your words, your actions, and here's the most salient, through your thoughts. Because so much happens in our mind. And what is real to us is what we perceive as real. And so I'm along the lines of that. We have many, many sage guidance counselors. We have the whole story of the Bible. There are other religions offering the same type of counsel. And the one common thread that I have gleaned is that so much happens in the mind and in one's attitude. So therefore, I am big on correcting my thoughts, because we can invest in our thoughts. In fact, carrying it further, your first thoughts of the day are probably the ones that you're going to be stuck with throughout the remainder of the day. So choose your thoughts wisely. This is why many whom I know, and myself included, we start the day in prayer. It is the search for an alignment with all that is good in this world. And it's almost as if it's a vibrational thread, that if we can align with that prayer, higher thoughts, reaching out towards divine guidance, this type of thing, if we can align with that, I believe that we attune ourselves to that, and we get on the same vibrational frequency with it. And that is something that we can maintain throughout the day. Grown-ups know that you have to choose this. Small kids that don't understand this yet think that things are vested upon them, when I believe that everything comes from within. So the alignment, therefore, needs to be an internal one with God, with the divine. It's an internal process. The work is internal. The search is internal. The aim is internal. And I believe that as within, so without. I've always had a sense of that concept. And I know that for myself personally, that the work that I do on myself, it's all an inside job, all of it. And if you understand that, then it switches the focus of, God is not going to fix us and flip a switch. Our gift to God, our responsibility, is to work on ourselves and offer it up. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. You had so many beautiful things to say there, and I agree with every one of those. So well said, Claire. What would you say to that woman who's in a place where she needs to find healing for those old wounds of the past? What would be a first step? It's said in many of the things that you said to zoom out, to get a larger perspective. How do you do that from a place in the valley where you can't imagine that larger perspective?
I think it helps, first and foremost, to identify what it is that's going on with you emotionally. Because emotionally and spiritually, I believe that these things are joined. It's all sort of one thing happening. We are emotional beings. We are spiritual beings. And I like the adage, and I believe it's from the Bible, when you see your enemy, call it by name. Now, what does that mean? That means that there is strength and hope and quite frankly, power in getting real and identifying, first and foremost, what's really going on with you. Don't deflect. Don't bury it. Look it straight in the eye and say, I claim this. This is how I feel, and I'm not ashamed to feel this way. So step one, this is it. It's how I feel. It is real. Keeping a journal, writing it down, I believe that there's power in the written word, even if you never show anybody. What it does is it gets it off your chest, off your soul, puts it on the page. You can look at it. And there's a wonderful verification in a woman stepping up and saying, I have the right to feel this way. I do feel this way. It's my right. And this is exactly how it is. So then the next step becomes, therefore, what are we going to do about it, right? Because once we've identified it, good job. I mean, that's a hefty load right there. You know how many people aren't in touch with how they really feel? And you know how damaging that can be and how crippling that can be? So if you get in touch with that and you claim it and you give yourself permission, look, I feel bad. Give me permission to feel bad. If you give yourself permission to feel bad, it does lighten any shame that might be attached to that. And it verifies how you feel to the point where you can take it to the next step and really take a look at, okay, now the next question becomes how to best work myself out of this. And I believe that having an aerial view of your life and understanding that we are all of us a work in progress, that it's a process of becoming, and with regard to any wounds from the past, to acknowledge them, admit them, write them down, what have you, and then to work on your way of relating to it. And it's not so much that we have the wounds and the scars of the past, because I believe all of us have them in some variation. The question becomes, how shall I relate to this? How shall I relate to the damage in my past today? And for me, I think it's best to disassociate myself from the past because it's the past, and to keep my gaze on moving forward. And you can incorporate some of the things that have happened to you in the past into your story, your personal narrative, however you want to call it. But you don't have to identify with that moving forward into your bright future, because we're creating our bright future. And we're doing that by the power of choice. And so whatever it is that you feel best, with aiding and abetting your bright future, keep your eye on that, keep your gaze on that, keep your focus on that, keep your heart on that, and believe. The power of belief is a big one. You believe that you are moving forward in no uncertain terms into your bright future, and this is how you'd like it to look, and these are the people you'd like to be around you, and this is the environment you'd like to be in, and this is the work you'd like to be, pursuing, and understanding that nothing happens overnight. In my opinion, it's enough to have your eye, your vision on the road ahead. And, we all need to watch where our mind goes, because it's quite human to assess things when they're happening and see ourselves in a victim mode. And that's your choice if you want to do that. A victim mode of who? Typically it's of other people, that may be insensitive to us or may not be realizing at all that they are hurtful in some shape, fashion, or form. And so, then it's the perspective of, if that person has hurt me and I therefore now feel wounded, I think it's helpful to see that person as just as wounded as you are. but they might not have the insight that you may have. And so God bless the fact that we have insight. And let me therefore look at this person who's hurtful or who has hurt me as somebody who flat is not clear. They are not clear. But I am, and I'm going to work on my clarity. And I'm going to try to find for my own well-being the best way on which to consider, on which to perceive that this person has hurt me. And I have found in my own life that every wound that I've ever had is attendant to some person, being in my family, being a friend, be it a stranger, that has perhaps inadvertently, unwittingly hurt me. I think where I immediately go is, God bless them, they do not have clarity. They don't have a clarity, but I am searching for clarity. So again, it all becomes, Tina, I think, a matter of one's perspective. And whatever one needs in the mind to be able to reach out above and beyond themselves to get an aerial view of an episode that may have gone down, it all becomes, again, how shall I relate to this so that I can put this wound where there's a lot of pain around this particular episode, for instance. How am I going to put this wound in a manageable place so that I don't reach for something unhealthy, alcohol, drugs, whatever? Plenty of wounded souls walk this earth with sad problems with addiction. They're trying to make themselves feel better. And I think after you address that addiction, let's say you do, let's say you put it behind you, well, you still are left with, what am I going to do with my wounded spirit? This is in my mind. How am I going to relate to this? So I think along the lines of that I am a firm believer that part of our responsibility and part of our purpose in life, while we're here on God's green earth, is how am I going to become the best version of myself? And if people get solace and aid in reading books, there are plenty of them out there, inspiring books by those that have come before us who have written about their experiences from adversity to triumph. Well, I find that reading others and others' stories is incredibly inspiring and helpful because it shows us what is possible. So that there's a way to work out of adversity and debilitating wounds and all of these things. But the operative word here is work. You've got to do some work. You've got to make it a mission of yours. The desire has to be there, not to stay stuck in the same old drama. How do I switch the flip in my mind so that I am thinking differently, so that I can relate to this episode differently, and so that I can put it in a manageable place, so that I can incorporate it into my life as part of my story, but have it in a manageable space so that it doesn't rule me or define my story. And again, you have to do some work, but there's plenty of aid and assistance out there. And I've found that for each of us, with a tumultuous past, so to speak, they're all individual stories because we are individuals. And this is individual work. And so if you can seek to undertake it from that vantage point about, this is a mission of mine, This is a goal of mine. I will get there to the other side of this wound and this hurt because I can. I can. And with the assistance of your friends, a counselor need be, family, your religion, all of it. There are all kinds of things around us to aid and assist us. And all we have to do is search them out and incorporate them into our pattern for healing, our schedule for healing. Because there is a there to get to. We just have to be willing to understand that this work that I need to do, it's an inside job. And I have to be brave enough and strong enough to undertake it. So that's my understanding of these things.
I love all of those amazing points that you've brought out, how we need to take personal responsibility for healing, and yet that responsibility involves availing yourself of help that God provides through fellowship, through the gifts He's given of insight and laughter and counseling, and His presence in your life to carry you through as well. So we are being responsible and yet also not trying to go it alone without using any of the things that He's given us. I also love that you put this in the context of story, because the crisis is not the end of the story in any novel. It's the middle of the story. There is another part of the story after the crisis. So it's important to remember that. And you are such a great storyteller and an eloquent speaker. I would love for guests to be able to get more of your amazing words, and the way that you craft them is so poetic and beautifully done. Where can people find you and stay in touch with you and access your award-winning novels?
Thank you so much. That is so wonderful of you. I appreciate that, Tina. I will say my website, Claire Fullerton is my name. So ClaireFullerton.com will get you there. I spell Claire with an E, Claire. And Fullerton is just as it sounds. But everything that I've done, all kinds of information about me is right there. And my latest release is there, and my books that came before it. And it's very easy to find. And I do hope, thank you so much again. I do hope people go to ClaireFullerton.com and have a look at what's going on. But, summarily, Tina, I think that you have said it so well as, your summary. If we view ourselves and our story perpetually as a work in process, well, then there's nothing really to attach ourselves to really, get all dramatic over. As long as we keep reminding ourselves, this is just where I am now in the process. Now, I don't have to know where it's going. All I have to do is know that right now, I am in a process. I think that alone is helpful.
Thank you, Claire. You have been such a blessing today. I'm so glad that you came to share with us.
Thank you so much for having me here, Tina. What a pleasure.
I hope that all of you will go and access Claire's beautifully written novels and seek the stories that can be so healing, even in fiction, for us in our hearts, our minds, and our spirits, to help us be encouraged to live our best version of life and flourish. And I also hope that all of you listening will come back for the next episode of Flourish-Meant.